Start streaming. Okay. It says we're going live.
Live.
All right. I think we're live. I'm pretty sure we're live. But then again, I'm running this, so it could be just about anywhere. Hey guys, JayzTwoCents here. Tech Talk with JayzTwoCents and Barnacle Nerdgasm. And you guys were really excited when I told you that JJ reached out to me. And we have some really common interest. And here he is on Tech Talk to talk. You know, I've joked around that this should be renamed GPU Talk, and who better to have on this show than JJ himself from ASUS. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
You guys know my co-host here, Barnacles. Barnacles, tell everyone who you are.
Hello, my name is Barnacles, and I run Barnacles Nerdgasm, the YouTube channel. And I have technology and big screens and 3D printers. And I'm drinking a beer.
Usually drunk when you're doing it. So, JJ, before we get started here, tell everyone where they can find you. You know, I know you also do the PC DIY channel as well as, you know, the ASUS gig that you do. So tell everybody about that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit actually all over the place.
Yeah, sorry, I heard myself talking. I think somebody had to mute. Okay,
it was me. I'm sorry. I apologize.
All right.
Not very professional of me.
So, guys, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the intro, and we're going to just go ahead and get right in here. We have some topics that you guys are going to be interested in. I know you will. So, intro time.
Do it.
Okay, so JJ, what exactly is your title with ASUS?
That's interesting. You know, I don't know what it's been since some of our recent internal changes. So I guess for right now, it's something along the lines of technology evangelist and senior technical marketing specialist in community relations, because I kind of handle a couple of different roles within the company. So I do a lot of performance analysis and developmental feedback for our entire component line. So that's things like motherboards, monitors, routers, graphics cards, you know, sound cards, everything kind of in there. And I work with the product development team before the product actually gets finalized. And then from there, I also handle the ASUS PC DIY website. And from there, also the ASUS PC DIY YouTube channel. So that kind of covers, I guess, some of the roles and some of the titles there.
Two things in there that really caught my attention was you said tech evangelist. I really like that. I really like that. But secondly, so you are hands-on with a lot of these prototypes long before they're really ever seen with the public. So you're definitely take the technical side very serious, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, that's my background, actually. I don't come from a marketing background. So my background's actually in system consultation, system integration, white box building, you know, so it's much closer to that hands-on process. So when I was brought into the company, it was to kind of maintain that perspective and that kind of viewpoint of an actual user, but you know, with of course a little bit more of an advanced technical skill set and understanding of the product. So for me, definitely it's a personal passion on the hardware side to be able to kind of take my own experience and my own interest in the product, and then hopefully bring that symmetry from you guys as reviewers and the experience that you bring, along with also of course the users and what their feedback might bring to hopefully make the best products that we can.
You know, that's awesome, because I know there's a lot of companies that try and train from within, and you know, they may take somebody who has some knowledge but try and train them to do the marketing thing, and it's very interesting when you have somebody who's in marketing but doesn't understand what it is that they're marketing. So I think that's why you have such good rapport with the public, is the fact that they know you know what you're talking about. And I think that was the most common piece of feedback I got when we did our interviews at CES, which, by the way, I just want to say it's really nice to be able to talk to you without straining to do so, because that was painful. We were both
a bit sick, yeah.
Yeah. But you know what you're talking about, not just from a product learning or a product manager standpoint, but you were there in the design process, so you obviously have a much deeper, kind of an intimate relationship with the product, which I think is kind of unique in this industry. Not too many marketers are in that level of, you know, product integration and design.
Yeah, no, and I'm very happy about that. I mean, I'm very thankful that the company has put me in a position, also even within the new structure of the company, that we're creating our kind of a internal ASUS Academy so that we can take on the ownership of making sure that other people within our own company have that opportunity to learn more about the products. Because, you know, at the end of the day, all of us started somewhere, right? Nobody came in knowing everything about everything when it came to hardware. It's a complex ecosystem with a lot of different ins and outs when it comes to understanding everything. And, you know, especially you guys at kind of continually monitoring where technology is going, it's not an easy job to keep up with this. So
it's not.
I think it's a question of really I think respecting ultimately the end user. I'm a user just like you guys and just like our customers are. And at the end of the day, if we're asking somebody to spend, whether it's $100, $300, or $500 or more than that on a product, I ultimately am looking to try to make sure that their understanding of what they're buying into and what they're investing into is confident, right? That they feel comfortable with what they're spending on. Because I know if I was spending $500 on a GPU, I sure as heck want to know everything, the way the card's been designed, why it's performing better, what's the functionality, all the different aspects of that, because I worked hard for that money, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many people who. I mean, that's probably just put a block over your head for a second there. Sorry about that. I mean, it's because my audience is very diverse. I mean, we have some very seasoned veterans of overclockers and custom builders, and then I get messaged daily from people who, my videos may have been the very first thing they ever saw with PC, and they don't know where to get started. So what I like about ASUS, and I want to ask, is it ASUS or ASUS? That is such a debated topic.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to think about it. It's kind of like Dr. Seuss, but with an A in front of it. So
Gotcha.
Just say ASUS.
There you go, guys.
ASUS.
From their own mouth. So stop correcting me and saying, no, it's ASUS, because I always said ASUS. So anyway, but you guys carry a whole range of product that really do cater to, everyone pretty much on every different budget level. I mean, like Jerry has a Rampage 4 in his system, which is a very top tier board that you guys carry. But you can also get entry level boards that are sub $100 and still carry usable chipsets for gamers. So
those are for poor people, though, Jay. I want to clarify that.
The average poor person, we'll put it that way. So
no, but I mean, I think that's a good point. That's actually one of the things that I know when I first came into the company, almost about now 5 years ago. The really big focal points actually for us was to kind of reinsure and really sure that the actually entry level portion of our motherboard chipset was really well suited in terms of the features and the functionality. So taking our boards like the Pro or the LE, or the boards that were underneath, let's say like the perennial boards that everybody knew about, like Deluxe or Extremes,
right,
or boards along those lines, and making sure that those are really solid, because at the end of the day, that's where your volume is at. So we wanted to feel confident. And a lot of what we've actually spent time and effort on, especially if people are familiar with the content that I've done over the years, is that we spent a lot of time really helping to reinforce that the design standpoint of how we focused on boards, whether it's a $150 board or $300 board, has been very consistent. So we don't want to compromise. Like I'll give you a perfect example. For the Z87 launch, I went out of my way to go test every single board from our Z87-A all the way up to the Maximus 6 Extreme. So ATX, Micro ATX, and Mini ATX. It was over 23 boards, and I overclocked every single board to 4.8 gigahertz on 4 different samples selectively for each one, and then with 4 different memory kits, all of them doing 2400. And I posted that information out there in the community for the exact purpose to have you say, hey, it doesn't matter whether you buy the Dash A or whether you buy the Maximus 6 Extreme. The overclocking results is going to be exactly the same.
Right.
I want you to buy a motherboard that might be tiered up higher in the positioning is not going to be because of the quality of the product inherently or the overclockability. It's going to come down to the features and the functionality.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Is a lot of buyers, they think that once they start moving into different tiers, that they may be getting different stability and overclocks or functionality with the overclocking. But essentially, like the PZ87 series that you're talking about, you're really only changing which feature sets you're really most interested in. That way you can choose a board that fits your needs, but you're not buying features that you're not going to use, but you still maintain the same socket quality and the motherboard quality overall.
Yeah, and that's not to say, I mean, that there aren't some differences, right? I mean, so just like you're an enthusiast, right? And you actually have like one of your systems that's actually legitimately water cooled, not what a lot of people call water cooled when they're just talking about like a closed loop solution or something along those lines. There's users that sometimes want a motherboard that's got a better thermal heat sink, right? So that they can have better thermal efficiency, so that the temperatures are cooler on the motherboard, right? Now that's going to be maybe a difference between like the Deluxe and the Dash A. They both can overclock to the same frequency. Is the Deluxe going to have its VRM heatsink run a bit cooler? Right? Yes. Right. But in terms of the overall quality of the product, inherently, is one going to be better than another? No. It just comes down to, once again, those personal wants. I mean, but that's what makes PC DIY so cool, right? Is that you have that ability to kind of pick and choose what you want based on, of course, on your budget, but also based on kind of what your personal preference is. Do you want, great temperatures and great feature set, or are you somebody that's looking just for something that ultimately works at the end of the day, but still good quality?
I think inherently, though, kind of looking at it from a newbie or a new builder perspective, having as much product as Asus does, though, could be a little bit daunting to a new buyer because there's so many SKUs, especially when they're named like let's go back to the Z77, like the Z77. You had so many at the deluxe, and you had all the different SKUs. Even myself, when I was shopping, really had to spend a lot of time and really read between the lines on all the specs to figure out exactly what the differences were, because they were noticing that the SKU on them looks nearly the same, but the prices really were all over the spectrum when it came to the lowest end P77 versus the highest end. And so, I think it's kind of good and bad that you have so much of a product range that sometimes it might turn people off just because they don't know what to buy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely it's tough. I mean, it's definitely a lot better than it's ever been in terms of just the ease of use of getting a system up and running, especially for guys that have been doing it for a long time and knowing how systems have changed. Whether it's having to manually set IRQs or having to set jumpers on a motherboard, or
that was when I shined. That was my time.
Or a lot of those kind of variables that come into play, right? So it is hard, but that's why we spend a lot of time, reaching out to the community, putting out content, helping people clarify. But that's also where guys like in your positions as reviewers, we feel need to kind of take that ownership to put in the effort to make sure that there's a distinction in how products really get evaluated. Because sometimes it can be really easy to just look at, like I said, a base set of specifications, and if you don't spend that extra time to look in the layers of where the differentiation is, it can be hard to sometimes know what is the difference between a Z87 Pro or a Deluxe. Or when it really gets interesting is sometimes when you have boards at the same price point, right, but from different segments. So an example might be at $200, we'll have the Z87 Pro, we have the Maximus 6.0, and the Sabertooth Z87. They're all $200, right?
Right.
And I get these classic threads. Which one's better? Right? Is it Sabertooth? Is it Hero? Is it the Pro? So it is hard, but that's why we try.
That's something I try. That's something I try really hard to educate my viewers, is that you can't benchmark something when you're a consumer and you're trying to become a prosumer and you're educating yourself. You kind of have to not look at the prices, because you tend to go, okay, I have $200 to spend. So you filter and you look at all the $200 boards, but then you start to confuse yourself because, like you said, they're the same price point, but they have very different feature sets. And you have to determine what it is you need before you even look at the prices. Because, like the Sabertooth, for instance, that's a I mean, you guys have the thermal armor on there, which obviously made it over to the Maximus 6 as well. But it catered to an entirely different crowd than the Maximus did, for instance. I did a build for a customer last year, and I was in that same exact situation. Do I go with Sabertooth Z77 or do I go with the Maximus Z77? And in the end, I ended up going with the Maximus, which I think was only about $10 more at the time, ultimately because of the separated audio design that was on the Maximus, because we were going onboard audio. Yep. And so ultimately they had the same functions I needed with the built-in fan controllers and everything I wanted. But again, it came down to feature set. So yeah, like you're saying, it's really important that everyone do their. Are we getting paid for that, Jerry? Are we getting paid for that?
I'm getting paid for it.
Oh, we'll talk about the money you're bringing on the side in a minute. So, Jerry, when you bought your Rampage, let's go back in time. I don't know when you built it. What were you looking at, and why did you choose it?
Well, okay.
Now I know you filtered price highest to lowest. I know how you shop.
I did. I'm going to be honest. When I built that computer, I spent $10,000 just for the computer, not even screens included. And the reason why, and ASUS was the only option. I've just used ASUS motherboards, period. Like, not even looking at the other products. I have an ASUS netbook that I think I want to come throw through your guys' window. That thing's like the most worthless computer I've ever seen in my life. But motherboards, you guys, oh my god. Motherboards and graphics cards are the two things.
You know, Jerry, ASUS just put a stop payment on your check now, right? You know that.
That's okay. It's okay. Checks are for poor people.
Yeah.
Everybody in chat's blowing up over the poor people joke because none of your guys ever get my poor people joke.
Guys, that's
really quick.
Yes,
when I say for poor people, I'm saying I don't have it, so I say it's for poor people to make me feel better. See, when I say Ferraris are for poor people, I'm saying it's because I don't have a Ferrari and I can't get a Ferrari. So I'm like, I don't even want it because it's for poor people.
It's because you own a Bugatti.
That's right. That's right. I got a Subaru STI. It's like way better than any Ferrari. God, seriously, guys. But
So
anyway,
did you literally just buy the most expensive products on the market at the time and said it's the best?
Well, okay, maybe a little, but not really. It was. I looked at ASUS and I looked at what the top thing they had at the time was, because honestly, that's what I was looking for. I wanted to go for the highest profile system I could build that I wouldn't have to replace. That would have everything on board, all the Bluetooth stuff, all the USB stuff, USB 3, and all that stuff. And so I wanted to future proof it as much as possible. So that's why I went with the most expensive one. But I didn't just like go, hey, Asus, what's your best board, and buy it. I actually went out and looked at how people were overclocking, because that was a big deal to me. Overclocking's like everything to me. Like if you have a motherboard that can't overclock, then it goes in the garbage. I mean,
I want to point something out, guys.
Yes.
Jerry said future proof. When did you build that system?
2 years ago.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I guess it would have been, because in March of 2012 is when the 600 series, the GK104, launched.
I literally got I think it was it's the 30. I got the 3930K and the Maximus. Literally, they weren't even out on
the Rampage.
The Rampage. Sorry, God, I keep saying Maximus.
If you installed it in the Maximus, you did it wrong.
I know. I had to use a hammer and I bent all the pins. No, but it was one of those things where I knew it was all like super brand new stuff. I mean, when I got it, even the CPU was. But still, to have a computer that still plays, I mean, pretty much everything and does everything that I ask of it 2 years later.
For 10 grand, it better be.
Well, I mean, now I mean, today it's probably worth, I don't know, like $750.
But I just bring that up because of the conversation we were having yesterday. We were all kind of benchmarking our GPUs against each other, and then goddamn Paul had to come in and smash it all with his, oh, Jay got 15,000 in 3D Mark. How cute! And then he posts his four-way SLI 780 Ti 31,000 P score. I was like, oh, thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Hey, you think you felt bad? I felt bad because I have two. Let's see, I got two GTX 680 for the Win Plus editions. There's even a Plus on there. Yeah, no shit.
4 gigabyte models.
They got 4 gigabyte models that I think I paid when I bought them. I think I paid close to $1,400 for the two of them. And you're stomping on me with one generation newer, overclocked.
Single card.
Yeah. That pisses me off. Okay,
let's be realistic.
Everything I didn't spend in all that money. I'm never going to do that again. The next computer build is going to be a $350 APU, and I'm going to hook an extra 110 power supply up to it and get it done.
Well,
I think what you're probably trying to say, though, I think, Jason, is that there's that balance, right? I mean, there's always the quintessential sweet spot, but there is actually a legitimate reason sometimes to go to the top end, right? If you balance a build in the right way, a good example can be something like an X79 system, right? Where you sometimes get people that are going to spend let's say $2,500, which it's definitely at a topper end on a budget level for a system, but it's not crazy exorbitant. But let's say if you build $2,500, you could be looking actually at like 4770K, or you could be looking at like a 4820K on X79, right? But the difference could be in play is that at that X79 platform, you're only at that baseline of starting off at 4 cores and 8 threads, right? Where you could easily scale up. Exactly. Quad channel, more PCI Express lanes, more cache as well. Yeah. But you could also have that flexibility that in a year down the road, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and drop in a 6-core 12-thread chip. If you even want to go higher end and the board has Xeon support, you could be going 12-thread 24, right? Yep. So depending on what your usage model is, maybe you're doing content creation, maybe you're doing digital photography, maybe you're doing video editing, and you're doing gaming. There's a lot of things, and it can balance out. Like we've seen that with users like on the X58 platform that spent money on Gulf Town, right? When it came out, a lot of people said, hey, you're overspending, but they had really, really long life cycles, right? They were running those systems, and even right now, they're still running a really, really competent system.
Well, I have a friend that is still
great performance.
He's still running an X58 Sabertooth.
Yeah,
with 12 gigs of RAM and a ASUS 580, and his system still chugs along. Granted, he's not going to go benchmark or brag about anything, but he plays his games and does everything he needs. For instance, I tell him all the time because he watches my content. He helps me do videos, and he's over here playing with my stuff. I invite him over all the time, and he kind of comes in here and he's in like Nerdland when he's in this room.
He plays with your stuff, huh, Jay? I'm sorry, Ed.
He does, and when I get a new package, he's guaranteed to play with it, Jay. So anyway,
thank you for that, Jay.
So he comes over and he brings his system every now and then, and he asks me quite often. He may even be in the channel, guys. I'm talking about Coconut Monkey. He asks me, like, oh man, do I need a new computer and this and that? And I'm like, no. Quite honestly, if you want to wake your computer back up, get an SSD because he's still running on a slow hard drive.
Yeah, that's the biggest upgrade he can make right there.
Absolutely.
Actually, let me jump. There's something I want to jump in on the SSD subject, and that is it's actually kind of two topics here. It's one, I did the complete wrong thing by buying the top tier everything. I'm not saying that it's not always the right move, but I did it for all the wrong reasons. I was trying to get the absolute best bleeding edge performance I could get, but then once I brought it all together, I didn't really take the time and due diligence to optimize it and push it to its full potential, which means I probably could have bought, a lot cheaper stuff and pushed it a lot harder and ended up with the same net result of what I had 2 years ago.
Well, case in point, how many radiators and fans do you have, and what are you water cooling?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, so my water cooling setup is 2 Black Ice 360 radiators with 12 Ultra Kazi 130 CFM fans and a liter of fluid with an OC Cool high-speed pump. And so basically, I have enough cooling that I could have 4 Titans in there, and it would barely raise the temperature of the water.
And you're only running your CPU. And for clarification, guys, OC Cool is Alpha Cool. I just want to put that out there.
Okay, yes, an Alpha Cool. Dude, the pump is like indestructible. I know I've run like rat turds and stuff through it. Anyways, it's awesome. But the problem is I have all of that cooling, and I'm using it all to take 3930K to 4.6 gigahertz. Which, let's be honest, most chips you could do that on air. I got a bad chip, so I needed a little bit more cooling to pull that off. But still, I really, really am not utilizing it. For that cooling setup, I should be running my motherboard chipset through there. I should put water blocks on my sound cards with that kind of cooling in there. I mean, let's just be honest, right? And so it was way overkill. The system is completely unbalanced. The nice thing is I have all the potential there, and water cooling stuff really doesn't get outdated. So, when I upgrade to the next computer, my next graphics cards 100% are going to have water blocks on all of them. And just like Jay, Jay pretty much, how can I not have water blocks on my GPU now? He pretty much showed me that like a $400 card stomps on my 2680 for the Win editions. I'm actually depressed about that, Jay. We're going to remedy that tonight on
that's why in my Things to Know About Video Cards video that I made last year was I never, and actually you can speak to this a little bit too, JJ, when it comes to the different board line, custom PCBs versus reference. I know you have some sitting over there. I never, ever, ever personally buy the custom PCBs. I'm a reference guy because I honestly like to save the dollar, and I water cool everything, and I'll push it to the maximum reference design capabilities, and then I'm good. Because the amount of frames per second that I get, honestly, the benchmarking is bragging to say, oh, okay, I got 158.9 frames per second in Valley Benchmark. Ultimately, in the end, guys, I throw VSync on, lock it at 60 frames per second, and let that card run its life. That's what I do.
That's the funny thing, though, Jay, is that you made actually a really good point there. Is I get these people like I used to brag all the time because I'd run the Unreal Engine demo, and I'd be like, man, I got 1,200 frames per second on this old FutureMark shit. And I'm like, that is so cool. And I'm like, yeah, but I got a 60 hertz monitor in front of me that's capable of showing me 60 of them per second. So yeah, it just... Go ahead.
No, I want to segue us into some of the GPU designs that ASUS takes in mind. And what do you guys do when you get the reference design from NVIDIA or AMD? And one of the things I do like is that you guys cater to both enthusiasts, AMD and NVIDIA. What are you guys looking at? What are you improving when you come up with the custom PCBs like the Poseidon we looked at CES? And what's your ultimate goal with redesigning the card?
Well, for us, at the end of the day, it's ultimately just trying to make a product that's superior to the reference design. Now, what does that really mean? It covers different perspectives. So in some ways, it's going to maybe equate to reliability. In some ways, it's going to be aesthetic complementary decisions. And in other ways, it's going to be performance-oriented. So let's go from just a performance-oriented example. For one, when NVIDIA introduced the GPU boost architecture, which was essentially like dynamic overclocking on the GPU, the cooler that you can keep that GPU, the higher the boost clock is for that card, so therefore the better the performance, right? So if you take something like a GTX, 760, and it's boosting to, 970 megahertz on the reference design, well, on our non-reference design, maybe we can have it boost consistently to 1.5 gigahertz, right? So it's going to be providing faster and better performance. Now, there's also then the perspective of performance from other metrics like temperature or acoustics. A lot of people, they care about, how quiet their system can be, and quiet can come from different elements. When you take a look at a card, so like, here we've got this, this is right here. This is actually an R9270X. Can't see it unless I pop off the heat sinks, which I can actually go ahead and do.
Heat pipe much?
if you consider the acoustics of a card, you can have acoustics not only from the fan, but you can also have like acoustics from the inductors or what are referred to as the chokes. And so
you're referring to coil whine, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And so like what we did actually a long time
I
ago.
want to point out just real quick, not to interrupt you. My 780 guys, the other night when I was doing my live overclocking and I pushed it to 1.3 volts, that was temporary. There's no way in hell I'd keep it there because when I was doing my benchmark, I'm hearing, yeah. I mean, they were whining like crazy. That is impending death of a card the longer you let it do it.
Wait a second. Was that the benchmark results you showed me?
Of course.
No, you can't. No, that has to be sustainable. I thought that was sustainable.
Absolutely not. That's max overclock.
I hate you, Jay. I almost went and bought those cards. I almost did. Oh, my God.
So
all right, what do we got there?
Right there, this is the
chokes.
VRM assembly.
Yep.
And here you've got the inductors, or what are referred to as the chokes. And these actual chokes right here, they're referred to as what are called molded inductors. So that actually means that they're not hollow. We actually use an alloy material, and it's fully formed. So it actually goes fully encased, and so that actually helps to not only give us better power output and better thermal efficiency, so the choke runs cooler, but it helps us significantly reduce coil whine, improve overall the performance. So there's elements like that, like temperature performance, the acoustics, the quality of the card. Then there's other things too, like when we talk about reliability. This fan, it doesn't look necessarily special, but what we started doing a couple of generations ago is these fans actually feature a double sealed internal hub assembly. So what that just means is that if I was to separate this fan, the inside hub, which has actually the bearing which helps to have the card actually rotate, the fan blade rotate, that's actually sealed. And the reason why that's important is that dust, debris, dander can't get on the inside of the hub assembly. And that's not something that impacts you in the first 3 months of ownership. That's something that affects you, 2 years, 3 years into the ownership of a card.
Right.
And that fan blade can start wearing down. Maybe it's not as effectively rotating as much, and it can affect the overall lifespan. And that just comes from also like long-term foresight. When we're looking at cards, we've been developing pretty much GPUs since the very first GPUs were put on the market, and that's helped us to develop a lot of information as customers RMA or have had failures. We can see, hey, this is where consistent points of failure happen. How can we go back and we can improve upon those aspects so that we can give you a more reliable card? And it'll come into lots of little different ways. Other items might be like the capacitors. If you actually take a look, I don't know if we can get really close. Let me see if I can show you guys.
It's actually showing up fairly clear on the video I'm getting.
So if we take a look here, these capacitors, I don't know if you can actually see the marking, but they'll actually say a 5K right next to it. And that actually means that they're rated for actually 5K operation at 105C. So most capacitors in a regular reference card are going to be usually 2K. So it's significantly higher rated in terms of the temperature tolerance. And like
so you guys are overbuilding it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily even overbuilding it. It's sometimes actually taking consideration different environments. Like, you got people that'll build super small form factor enclosures where heat will increase because it's really tight.
Right.
What about here? I'm in California. What about the guy in Nebraska? And then what about the guy in Florida? Ambient temperatures can sometimes swing, 20 degrees easily in different parts of the country. And so sometimes it's a question of just realizing that we want to build the parts so that wherever they might end up being, they work better. And we also have to consider the kind of the performance user. So like on something, let's say like an ROG card, right? This is a big, beefy, crazy triple slot.
Yeah, it's like
piece.
a 3-slot card. Jesus, that's nuts.
We know people are going to maybe run like 2 of these, and they're going to run them in SLI or Crossfire. They're going to overclock their CPU, even have more heat. So we'll put 10K rated capacitors in these guys that actually even have higher temperature tolerances because there's even going to be a further increase. And it's just all about essentially just making sure that the investment in the product is sure, when you're spending that much money on a product.
It's really surprising to me that NVIDIA, at least, okay, I won't even say NVIDIA, we'll just say in general, that they would use a 2K capacitor like that, considering the fact that capacitors are not expensive and they're not mass producing. I mean, they're designing and letting you guys do the production. So that's what's interesting to me. Maybe do they just know you guys are going to probably up that capacity quality anyway?
Well, I mean, you have to kind of look at it from their perspective. Both AMD and NVIDIA ultimately are producing a reference product. So their kind of perspective and their ownership stops at ensuring that the product meets its performance metric, right? The minimum performance metric, right? But our job as, an ODM and a developer for that actual card has to kind of take a little bit more of that real world consideration into it. And this is not to say, once again, that like a 2K capacitor doesn't work. It does work. right? But a lot of this then can blanket into other ways. So an example is because of our position and market ownership, right? We might be able to source higher quality components at a lower price
True.
and be able to blanket that out across more products. Maybe other companies might not be in that same position to do that because they don't have that ability to go across and say, hey, we're going to do this. So I'll give you an example. Like when we did the 5K capacitor rollout, we did that for both unilaterally for AMD and for NVIDIA cards, and we said every single card, going from pretty much like about like $100 and up was going to fall under what we called an SAP, so a super alloyed power initiative, where we said non-negotiable. It's going to have this feature set built into it. Having that wide of a blanket kind of integration helps us to bring the cost down on better quality technologies and features for the users. So it's a really kind of a hard balance of a lot of different things, and the same thing actually exists for motherboards. Intel, they actually design a reference white paper and a guidance to how to kind of develop a board from basic perspectives. But then our job and kind of our expertise comes in is how can we still push that better? How can we make it perform better? How can we make it perform more efficiently? So, a lot of these things are ultimately based on experience and the personal kind of focus of what the company wants to position their product towards. If you're looking for the bottom of the barrel, absolute cheapest components, then it's not going to be a big issue. And there'll be little things that sometimes are hard for you to see. Like a good example is if I pull that card back again, cheaper cards on the market won't like shield like the DVI ports or like the HDMI ports or the VGA ports.
Right.
It's not a big deal. Is the card going to work? For sure, it'll work, but you get sometimes susceptibility to EMI. So sometimes like the image will be a little bit more fluttery on your screen. You'll get a little bit more flicker. You can get oscillation or humming that can occur.
Which is important because ultimately the video cables are running usually right along power.
Yeah, exactly. So for us, it's just kind of like, if it's a minor point, right, but it helps just improve the quality a little bit further, why not just push that over? Because that's our kind of position, is that we want to make sure that ultimately what you're buying, we want to just make sure that we've kind of tried to look at all the perspectives at how we can improve it and hopefully give you a better quality product.
Well, the other thing is you do have to make a profit as a company, so it does make sense to produce the product as cheap as possible, but keeping it as reliable as possible at the same time.
And let's be honest, the graphics card market is not a huge moneymaker for companies like ASUS. I mean, there's not a lot of markup in these cards, cost of production versus what they sell them for ultimately in retail.
It is. I mean, definitely. I mean, the margin game it's a difficult business to be in, and you have to come through and really look at a design intelligently. You have to know where to improve upon certain elements and where to put back on other elements. And this is also the balance of listening to the users and their feedback. Because sometimes people will ask you for stuff and they just think that it's easy to just throw something on there, and they don't realize that that's another $1 here, or that's another $3 here, or that's another $5 here. And to you, it might not seem like a big thing, but once you then factor in all those other little steps of how that aggregates the price, it can be a big factor. Like, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When we started doing like matte PCB, right?
Mm-hmm.
People love the matte PCB. It looks gorgeous, right? But like a certain MSI gaming card won't use matte PCBs. They'll use brown PCBs. It's a preference.
We'll verify that, guys. We'll verify it. I promise.
It's a personal preference factor, right? It's not going to make the card perform better, but that matte PCB on average can be anywhere between like $2 to $5 extra just for that PCB.
Because it's a whole different PCB. It's not just coating, right?
Yeah. So it's just little things like that, and all that stuff adds up, right? And it's just a balance factor of what do users want and what are they interested in.
It's really interesting. It makes me wonder sometimes in the design process why certain companies choose the products they do. I mean, for instance, like you've mentioned, MSI tends to use a brown PCB, which I won't use a brown PCB, especially a motherboard. No way, has to be black. But then you have other companies like Gigabyte, which are notoriously known for the blue PCB that generally does not fit anybody's color scheme unless you go with like a P series ASUS, which makes really interesting sense when it comes to an aesthetic standpoint. But when you know the market. Generally, the market is very vocal about what they do and don't like. I mean, I know you guys hear what people say. As much as people think big companies don't listen, EA and DICE, we do know that there are companies that do. So when you're very vocal about this PCB is ugly, it makes you wonder why certain companies continue to do that and continue to just use it. Maybe it's a cost thing, like you said. Maybe their margins are poorer, and so they have
warranty,
to make those...
support, where they're selling in the world. No, I've actually been involved in the production of hardware before, And the biggest factor that you have if you're a large company and you have a large user base and it's across the entire country, so you're multinational,
Right.
you do have to deal with the support cost of that product. And if you shipped a product that has a bad component, the only way to service that is to basically recall those products and fix them, which is incredibly expensive, or to issue a revised version of that product and cannibalize it, which is even more expensive. So spending an extra $2 for a better capacitor because you know in the past from data that you've seen the other capacitors fail, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Because making sure that doesn't come back on you.
You're 100% right, and that's a good perspective. Not a lot of people understand also that that's part of kind of the complete cost of ownership cycle. Is that sometimes us just spending a little bit more helps us in the total cost of ownership cycle, and we don't have to eat that later, where we have to RMA a board more frequently, or we have to replace something else because we've elevated on the quality. And there's a lot of little things like that people don't even realize. Like if I go to like an IO shield right here, and I take a look at something like a motherboard, we use stainless steel IO shields as opposed to carbon plating. And carbon plating, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot flimsier, and it's also very prone to oxidation. So it's not that much of an issue in certain parts of the US, but in let's say the southern part of the US where you have really high humidity, you can actually have really big oxidation on here, and some of the ports can actually get contact issues over time. So there's a cost difference. You'll see, I'm not in the game. I don't like to really call out other board vendors at what they don't and don't do. But let's say
I can do it for you. Just give me a hint.
let's say another board vendor with the word A as the front of their naming convention or M brand.
We'll just say A
as well. They use a carbon plating as opposed to that. So there's things like that are big. And then there's things that are small, but ultimately, what we're really just trying to do is make sure that we can try to put a good quality product. I mean, at the end of the day, the product is what speaks for itself. I've been building for a long time, and for the people that have been building on ASUS historically, more than features, more than functions, more than anything else, over time, they'll usually come back and tell you that the reason why they keep building on our products is because they've consistently worked.
That's exactly why I buy ASUS products, is because they do work, and it has the least failure rate of any.
Sell out!
Well, actually, the funny thing is, I come from I've built, and a lot of people find this hard to believe, but I used to work at a small computer store. It's still in business today, so go harass them. Mothersboard Computers in Gorst, Washington. Tell them Jerry sent you.
No, you'll get 10% off if you say that.
I built, good luck there. But anyways, we had to build cost-effective systems because we were a small mom-pop operation, and the margins had to be good. Otherwise, there's no way we could stay in business because we just weren't moving volume. And so we had to sell motherboards like, MSI. Yeah, I think it was the MSI guys. And epochs. Are you familiar with epochs?
Back in the day. Hey, we can go back in the day. We can go to epochs,
let's go.
Albatron.
There's a reason why epochs is not around anymore. Our failure rate on those boards was 1 out of 4.
Oh, wow.
And I built for a company, actually I probably shouldn't say their name, but I did build, mass produce a computer for a company. Over the course of 2 years, we built 500 units for that company that I personally assembled and tested each unit. And I just had stacks of these motherboards I was having to send back.
I would have had so much fun with that. I would have lined up systems in groups of 4, and everybody at the company has to put their initials inside of a case somewhere hidden. And when it comes back, if your initials on there, you get the pot. Like you have to put money in a pot and bet on which system's coming back.
No, because then I would have been poor. No, anyways. But there are motherboards that basically prove themselves to be bad, and bad news travels fast. That's the problem with that.
Yes.
Use an ASUS as an example. If I got a motherboard from ASUS and it didn't work, not the end of the world. Send it back, get it fixed. But if I get a second one from ASUS and it's got another problem with it, I'm pissed. It's one of those things you have to avoid that, and then that voice gets out there. Other people start jumping and going, "Oh yeah, I had a bad experience too," and it builds. And
I don't know about you guys. I can tell you that.
I'm sorry. I just want to answer a question.
Sure, go.
Popping up here really quick. For free, Xavier was asking about a mini ITX AM3 Plus motherboard. There isn't, but there's a really interesting story behind that. We actually developed really the only high-performance AMD-oriented, FX-oriented mini ITX motherboard. It was the M4A88T-I Deluxe, and that was after a huge amount of whirlwind from the community saying, "Hey, we want it, we want it, we want it, we want it."
What was the chipset? I'm just curious. What was the Northbridge chipset?
That was, I believe, the either 880G. I think it was 880G.
Oh yeah, so we're talking like 2011, 2012.
Yeah, and the overall buy through was really really low for it, and so we've continued to kind of see some people that keep asking for it, in the same way that some people are asking for a high performance micro ATX FX enabled board. And what I tell people is, we'll make something if the commitment is there from the community. But the thing is, we really have to get enough feedback from the community. So, what I would say is that if you're somebody that is passionate and you want to see that type of product, I think that we've shown, especially within a lot of what we've developed, whether it's been, really interesting boards like the mini ITX boards, or even the Gene series, which were really the truly first high performance micro ATX, enthusiast overclock centric boards, or what we've done on the GPU side, we'll produce it when the community is stepping up and saying, hey, we're really interested in this. But it takes enough feedback really from a lot of people to say we should put the traction in it. Because the other thing is, it takes us a huge amount of time and investment to really make a quality board. We're not like, I think, some other vendors where we're just gonna put it out there,
the tooling alone,
and put it out there. Yeah,
like the robot, the actual robotic calibration and tuning that goes into that. People just don't understand how in depth that is.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's like, actually, what's it's a lot more complex than chassis, and I know ding to chassis manufacturers, but this is very similar to chassis manufacturers. For a chassis vendor to kick off an entirely new tooling for a chassis can be sometimes in the vicinity of $250,000 to $500,000, right? To kick off an entire brand new development for one new chassis, right? So when people say, oh, you should have just moved this or this or this, that's great feedback, and definitely it should be incorporated for next generation products and designs. But it can be a very expensive process, in the same way like a very, very specialized or high-end board that requires a lot of features or functions can sometimes take us, between 6 to 9 months to do in the development stage. And you're literally talking sometimes tens of thousands of hours on the development side, on R&D and revisions and all that stuff.
And like he was talking about, hey, I really want, or really, are you going to make an AMD AM3 Plus ITX board? Guys, you have to realize too, ITX form factor, mini ITX, is just barely catching on for the Intel side, which makes it the majority of the market. I mean,
correct, yeah.
Guys, over time, things got bigger and bigger and bigger. You had XL ATX, you had servers. I don't remember what the actual names for server ATX is, but I know, like, I have an XL board in here, and it's like people don't understand how now everyone's making this paradigm shift to I want small, because the technology is finally getting to the point to where you can go small form factor and you're not really sacrificing much in terms of features. If you're going super small form factor and you're going mini ITX, chances are you're not going to SLI anyway, so you cut off a good chunk of the board there. But now people are starting to chant, small. So it takes time for the market and the manufacturers to adjust to these paradigm shifts. So by the time everyone starts building ITX boards, people may start wanting something else again. So it takes time, and there's very, very big wheels that go into motion to start making these things happen. And
sometimes it's just really hard. It's not to cut you off, but like a good example is with the mini ITX, right? Who the heck thought we would do an independent vertical daughter board to resolve the power delivery issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
To ensure that really, if you wanted to push a high level of current or amperage output, that's what we had to do. Of course, now it seems like, okay, that totally makes sense, but nobody did it until we did it.
Right.
So,
well, I can tell you why there was a shift to the the ITX and the smaller form factors, and that was simple, is because people are now integrating their systems into their entertainment centers.
Yeah,
it used to be your computer sat on a big desk, you had your 3 screens and your everything. But me, I've got 3 media centers in my house that are all integrated with my components. And to do that, I need smaller form factor devices, and I also need to cut down heat and noise in those scenarios. And so that's why you see things like one of the things that really, really fascinates me is like the new Intel NUC, is it? The little itty bitty form factor that they have now. It's actually got next to no graphics horsepower whatsoever, but it's this tiny little computer. It's got like next to no fans in it, sits on your desk, runs off an AC adapter with like 12 volts. You could adapt it to run in a car if you wanted to. And it's a pretty decent speed, and it's very, very cost effective if that's what you're after. And it even works as a media center. Some people are running it with XDMC.
Like that.
What's that?
Bryce P says I sound auto-tuned.
You actually do a little bit.
We were telling him earlier,
he sounds like an airline pilot. He's like,
yeah, north wind's coming in from the west. Yeah, runway 3 is clear. Yes, you may taxi.
Oh, man. Okay, so I know one of the questions I put in the topics that we're talking about tonight was directly requested by a few people. Is they kind of want to know more about the DCU2 cooler and what makes it unique compared to other multi-fan options, and why is it unique? Because I know each card, they look the same on the top, but each card is kind of custom designed based on the thermal needs of the particular card that it's attached to. Am I right?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, when we first kind of developed the direct CU, the underlying course kind of key technology was direct contact, continuous heat pipes, right? So that's pretty straightforward. So when you look at a direct CU2 heatsink, any card that ever says direct CU2 is always going to be direct contact copper. So it's just like this, where here, of course, you see the nickel-plated heat pipes, but then directly there for the GPU, it makes contact, and we don't nickel plate that so that we get the best thermal efficiency. And then from there, that goes out there to the heatsink assembly and the fin array, and then of course the 2 comes from the 2 fans, right? So in terms of what kind of makes direct CU2 different is a couple of different things. One is that we really try to prioritize on the thermal efficiency of the entire heatsink assembly. So take for instance on something like an R9 290X, so that's going to be,
you're going to pull it out, aren't you?
This guy right here. This is actually the interesting thing is this one looks all black.
Yeah.
I haven't put the decals on it because one new introduction that we did for the newer cards is we started giving metal adhesive strips, so you can color affix it to your board. So you can put like red, you can go all black, cool. Or you can
even paint them if you wanted, right?
You can go gold if you want to match it with our gold series cards. So that's kind of a cool thing that we're starting to do to allow the aesthetics to kind of be more customized.
Real quick, is that only on the 290X, or is the 780 Ti's and the other high-end NVIDIAs have it too?
Oh, you're talking about for the metals, the metal
emblems,
adhesive?
yeah.
Yeah, that's also on the TI. Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
And we definitely, if you guys like that, please give us feedback. It took us a lot of effort to get our product development team to be able to incorporate having that flexibility, and we have some great ideas for how we want to continue to evolve it. But at the end of the day, once again, the consumers are the one that make things happen. So if you guys like seeing that type of flexibility and having that modular type of design, then please let us know. And to be clear, once again, these are not stickers. This is actual metal.
It's metal.
And it has an adhesive strip that then you can place on there. But I think somebody else had a question before I was going to continue on with this.
No, JJ, I was just going to ask you. I mean, can I have it?
I can send you some of the stickers.
It's a YouTube thing. Like when somebody has a piece of hardware, you're supposed to just ask them if you can have it. I guess like 1 in a million, they say yeah.
Well, so no, Jerry, you're supposed to assume they have a stack of them ready to ship. That's what you're supposed to assume.
Oh, okay, never mind. Can I have it later?
Yeah, when the 300 series is out, sure.
Well, I feel bad that my graphics cards are so damn slow and inferior, so I need new graphics cards. So
you need to beef up the beast. I gotcha.
Like, can I get any of the? I mean, did the Bitcoin miners? Do they already own that one? Did you have to borrow that from a Bitcoin miner? Or
no. We sent them over all the Aries cards. You did?
Okay, fantastic. Because I need a new card, and I can't. I got to pry it from their hands. It sucks. Oh.
So getting back to your 290X question, or how we kind of
look
at the DC2. Yeah. Each card is a little bit different, but the big thing is that one of the unique things that will change is the overall heatsink assembly. So this part right here, the entire metal portion or the heatsink itself, that will try to optimize to whatever the thermal output is of the GPU. So some might be targeted for, let's say, 200 watts of thermal dissipation. Other ones might be rated for 300 watts. And so that's what we make an adjustment for. Gotta love the Iron Man. So on this card, you can see that the heatsink is much, much larger because, of course, the size of the card. And then you've got this fat, huge 10 millimeter heat pipe. And this is what we call an SSU heat pipe. So it actually has a very, very elongated curve. So it has a larger surface area that flows through the entire card, helping us to actually have better heat dissipation. I guess
a design question. Does the length of the pipes matter? Like, okay, let me rephrase that. Are they all the same length? Kind of like a header in a car. They have to be tuned so they're all the same length. So are they? What's the design?
It's tricky, actually. So an example is, this might not seem like a big deal, is going, because our previous ones we had like 8 millimeter, but then when we wanted to do this really large 10 millimeter, this took us almost 1 year to correctly develop, because as you elongate, you actually add structural integrity issues to the pipe. The pipe actually can have torsion issues. It can cave in on itself structurally, because you have to remember the inside is semi-hollow because of the heat pipe, right? So you have a lot of considerations. So there are elements to how the actual the heat pipe tubing traverses the entirety of the heatsink, and in some ways it'll give you more efficiency, and depending on where its placement in, we want it in certain directions as opposed to other directions. So you are right, placement and length all come into that part of the design.
Yeah, especially since we all know, regardless of whether it's in a pipe or not, heat wants to rise. So you want to take advantage of that natural conduction of I think it might be convection of the heat.
Yeah, correct. The convection of the heat coming from the GPU die. So another thing is, like I said, consistently all direct CU outside of being direct contact with the heat pipes will also always feature those dust-proof fan-based designs. So that means that those fans will always feature that double-sealed internal hub assembly. So that's going to be a key characteristic.
What's in the middle of that fan? Is it like a dual kind of a design?
So
it's like a little fan inside of a big fan.
On the front fan.
No, so this fan is actually a new fan that we developed, that we started using when we first developed the GTX 670 DC Mini. So if you guys remember when we first designed
that tiny little guy.
The tiny, exactly, that card, we developed actually a hybrid between an axial base fan and a blower base fan. So that fan actually has downward firing properties, but it also has actually rotary exhaust properties. So this fan, we use that Cooltech fan here, and then we also then have a standard axial based fan here on the back. So we have two different types of fan implementations. Now, that won't always be consistent on DC2 cards. That will be a choice that we'll make depending on the card. But a DC2 card will always at least feature two fans, and then will also always feature that dust-proof base design as part of the fan. Now, as far as some of the other features that are always going to be consistent within DirectCU2, what does that mean? That's also going to apply to the non-reference card design. So one is you're going to always get the SAP capacitors. So those are those 5K rated capacitors. That means you're always going to get the SAP chokes. So
now the fans on the DirectCU2 also are downdraft to passively or actively cool those components too, right? The air travels through the fins and down onto the PCB.
Yeah, we always have to factor that in, and depending on the cards, there might be other improvements. So, like on a high-end card, so like this is a GTX 780 Ti, right? You're going to have, of course, a VRM heatsink that goes directly over the MOSFETs. So for you guys that don't know what the MOSFETs are, that's this part right here on the graphics card, and that's pretty much the hottest part of the graphics card outside of the GPU. Mm-hmm. Those guys, especially for a higher end card, and as you overclock it, those can easily, exceed 70 AV 90 C in terms of their operating temperature.
Yeah, because they're directly responsible for the power delivery, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. They're a key point in terms of the overall what's referred to as a phase. Mm-hmm. People usually term the chokes as phases, but that's correctly incorrect. The phase is comprised of the MOSFET, the driver, and the inductor.
And that's a 12 phase. Together. And that's a 12 phase because you have 12 MOSFETs, right?
Well, this one's not a 12 phase. This one's actually you could count it, right? You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because this is only a 270X.
Oh, I see. I see now. It looked like 2 rows for a second there. I didn't realize there was a silver strip.
Yeah, now, but you talk about like this guy. This is over 20 phases on a card, so this is crazy. So it'll vary, but the main thing will be, of course, that they're fully molded inductors. So that means that you're going to get better temperature performance, better power output. Now, another factor will be that the power output rating of these inductors, we try to always have that be above the reference. So an example is that like the reference card might have 5 phases, and one of those phases is only designed to put out 30 amps in terms of the power output capability. And we might put 6, and each one can offer 40 amps in terms of power output. So collectively, not only do we offer more phases, but they're also higher in terms of their power output. And then the third part, so that SAP, once again, that's that 5K rated capacitor, the SAP choke, and then we have what are called the SAP MOSFETs. So those MOSFETs, they're super small package, so they're very thermally efficient, and they also have higher voltage thresholds. Yeah. So that means that you can push more voltage through them to help keep better long-term performance. So those I'd say kind of characteristically are the elements that comprise a DC2 card. From top to bottom, we really want to strive to give you a high-quality card that's fully non-reference. That means non-reference PCB, power and topology layout, as well as non-reference heatsink and fan assembly. I guess the side portion to that is going to be, see if I can find it here on this card.
Hey Jerry, Hey Jerry, I'm going to have JJ on every week and get rid of you, buddy. We have the highest retention rate ever right now with 50.
It's because I'm talking to everybody because I'm not saying anything.
50, I just want to point this out, JJ, that 50% of our viewers tonight have stuck around. I mean, our watching concurrent is 266 right now, but our total playbacks is 700. So we've kept almost half the crowd.
That's awesome.
That's actually pretty
All
awesome.
right, guys, so this is my final show. So
No, you gotta love Jerry, man. So this little guy right here is also what's referred to as our Digi Plus VRM. So what that just means is that we have a digital PWM. Now, like NVIDIA and part of their reference design, they'll use sometimes a digital PWM, but usually only like on their really, really high-end reference. So like the Titan was the first time that they like put a digital PWM controller on there.
Yeah,
so
because that's old technology for your motherboards, but fairly new for GPUs.
Even for GPUs, we've been actually doing digital now for almost 3 years. So we've been at the same time that we kind of really were pushing forward at making sure that was consistent on our motherboards, we were pushing that same design quality onto the GPUs. So that's kind of one of those things where a lot of times we put ourselves ahead of the curve of the industry, because even Haswell with the integrated fiber, that's essentially a digital PWM just built into the chip. And when we were messaging the fact that a digital PWM was going to give you better consistency in overclocking, better voltage regulation and management, even Intel knew that. They just hadn't phased it into the inside of the CPU yet. So it just kind of helped to show that a lot of times that's where we're putting in our effort at looking at really what can we improve and incorporate in there. But regardless of whether a user is going to buy something crazy like this, like a Matrix, or they're going to get something like the Poseidon, or a Mars 760 dual GPU.
Yeah. As a water cooler, that Poseidon is extremely interesting to me. It truly is. Just simply because it's the first, as far as I know, it's the first dual option, air cooling or water cooling without touching the cooler at all.
That is correct. It's a first. You've of course had cards in the past that just come pre-affixed with some form of water block, but this is the first time.
Right.
And this was really hard because it was just like when we developed the Maximus the Maximus 5 formula when we did the hybrid design. It's hard to make something work great on a passive or an air configuration, but also have it work really well when you incorporate the water.
And like we had to make a correction in our CES video that initially we thought it was GPU cooled only, but it turns out it is a full cover block.
Yeah, like I said, that was totally my fault. I still had a fever, from being sick.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
And that was just like I said, a mental slip there. But the entire, actually, you can see it right there. If I get in, you'll see that the entire plate runs the entire length of the card. So it completely covers the VRM, the memory, the GPU. So
but what's the construction material? What's the material of that block?
It's a composite-based material, so you still have copper plating there, and then you have nickel plating across the rest of that. Okay. And then we still use a special anodization process internally and on the actual external elements to make sure that it's water cooling friendly, so that you don't have to worry about any type of mixed metals or anything along those lines.
Right. I was praying that you weren't going to say aluminum. Okay. All right. So we've talked about really strong graphics cards. We've talked about what ASUS puts into the design your design efforts in both NVIDIA and AMD. Let's talk about panels for a moment here.
Amon, do you want me to bring out like a R260 or like a GTX, 650 Ti? He says, hey. I got too many high-end cards. I need to bring in some more budget cards.
Oh, I have one quick question before we move forward. The Mars.
Yeah.
Why did you guys choose the 760, the GK104 chip for that?
That just really came down to, it was a great card. I mean, when you take a look at the baseline performance of what a 760 offers, it's got a really good performance level in terms of CUDA cores, to memory bandwidth performance, its overclocking consistency. All those things added up to that we felt it was a really good combination to help to be able to manage the yield cost of binning two of those cards and integrating them in, and then be able to provide an ultra high performance card. And the scaling performance for that GPU is also very, very strong. So it just kind of was a really good fit. And I mean, the community responds to that too. If you take a look at a lot of what the community is doing when they're looking at an SLI configuration, the 760 is kind of that go-to card for SLI. You guys definitely have people that are doing it with a 770 or 780, Titans, and things along those lines. But that 760 hits that sweet spot. So that was it for us. And this card also, we wanted to try to make sure that we could keep it to be more accessible. Now, it's an expensive card. It is an enthusiast-oriented product. But at the same time, if you look at some of our previous cards, like the Ares or the Ares 1 or the Ares 2 or the Mars 1, the Mars 2, those cards were easily over $1,000, right? I think the Ares 2 was $12.99 or like $1,300, right?
Right.
So this was our goal, was to try to make an enthusiast card, but it was much more price aggressive, and it also wasn't going to be limited because the other cards, they were only generally 100, maybe 150 pieces for the U.S. and like 1,000 pieces like global production, right?
Right.
But the Mars is a perpetual card. We're producing it so that we can keep it in yield and availability until essentially we decide to transition out and develop another card.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too if the public's kind of stopped holding their breath for a 790 from NVIDIA, considering how far we are into the current generation. Because I mean, I think NVIDIA tends to do refreshes right around every 18 months or so, and I mean that puts us over halfway through the life cycle. So we're all hoping. So the Mars was kind of a welcomed, fully custom design. I mean, guys, ASUS designed that card from the ground up. I mean, it's not based on any other design. It's just like you said, you guys took the Ares and moved forward with it. With the Mars. That's the first time you guys have used that name, right?
No. We've Mars is for NVIDIA, and then Ares is for AMD. Base cards, but you're 100%
Gotcha.
right. This is a Verily reference card, and it's got a lot of things that I think I'm really happy about. Like, we did some really cool stuff here. Like, I don't know if you guys can tell, this is a full soft matte rubber finish.
Mm-hmm.
So we
That's cool.
fully matted the entire card so that it's got this really nice look, right? That also complements like like our G series notebooks, or like Cooler Master's done some chassis that have a soft matte finish.
Right.
So it's cool that you kind of even have that level of kind of aesthetic consideration when you get to a really premium product like this, because at the end of the day, when you're dropping that much, you do care about not only the hardware, but you care about things like the aesthetics and those details that go into the card's design.
It's the
right?
gold chains. It's
Yeah.
totally the gold chains.
And I've heard people complain before too about why is it always red and black? Well, guys, that's their signature ROG theme. I mean, you got to. I mean, that's their design. That's their trademark. So that's why it's red and black. But you guys are seeing they are. If you guys speak up and are loud enough, maybe they'll offer more options for the removable adhesive metal panels. That way, you guys can go full blackout if you want. And I just want to say the Rampage blackout is effing hot. If I were going to build an X79 system tomorrow, it would be the Black Edition. I mean, that Rampage X79 Black Edition, because you've seen my system. I like black and yellow. Yeah. So it would give me the flexibility of doing that without clashing. I think that is awesome.
Or just get some plastic coat.
But you're right. I mean, we are considering that. Like, we have done internal mock-up designs. Like, here, we didn't end up doing it. But if you see, we actually have a bolt retention mechanism here on this plating. Yeah. And we had initial prototype designs that we were toying around with where this part was actually going to be replaceable. So you could go with an entirely like kind of cobalt silver, and then there was a black on black, and then we even had a white, which was actually interesting because ROG has had white accents. Yeah. So we try to play around with it. If we made it like black or like cobalt, that could color mixed with almost any other color.
I saw some people chanting for white PCBs from ASUS. I don't know if you guys want to hold your breath on that one anytime soon, but I know that white is really making a big splash right now.
Oh yeah, no, it's made a pretty aggressive actually comeback in the last I'd say it started with that 600 Corsair 600T, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you kind of really saw something you're like white.
Yeah, and then Galaxy made the white 680. Which did
their HOFs.
Yeah, and I love white builds. I'm just going to tell you right now, I love white builds. I mean, when I was at the Newegg Studios the other day, I was looking at a white build that they did with white Dominator and a white water block, a white radiator, white PCB. It looks. I love white, and not to mention, guys, believe it or not, white looks cleaner a lot longer than black when it comes to the cleanliness of your case.
The only hard part is that white PCB is. It's really difficult yield wise, so it's tough.
It is. It's definitely a niche thing.
I think I'll just stick with my black computer, gentlemen, because it's a lot bigger and stronger than most. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, JJ, it's in a Case Labs case on top of that. So.
Oh, that's all you had to say. It was Case Labs. We just knocked it right there, dude.
Yeah, Case Labs M10 with the customized extended top and a whole bunch of stuff on the inside.
But I'm with you. I love big chassis, man. I got a lot of 3 of my chassis.
I do too. I like a little junk in the trunk.
Jerry is a big chassis. What are you talking about? Look at the guy.
Yeah, I just wanted to match my personality.
He's like a walking Case Labs himself.
I am.
I'm more like a stacker. I mean, JJ met me in person. I'm a big guy. I'm a lot bigger than I look like on camera. So I'm kind of like the stacker case. I mean,
You're
I'm kind of
cheap and expandable?
I'm cheap and expandable, and you can put a lot inside me if it's food. So
Ooh, I don't know if I'd go around saying that too much, Jay.
I said food.
But actually, I think all of us are, on that bigger side, and I think that's part of the reason. I mean, I've got all kinds of different form factor builds, but that's one of the reasons actually why I like going with a bigger build is because being a bigger guy, bigger hands, definitely, I like having the room to work with. I don't want to feel cramped when I'm,
like I was saying, gentlemen.
It's
saying, go big or go home.
Yeah, it's
that's
nice.
why I liked building in the 900D, and I still happen to make it so that there were parts that were really tight to work in there. So okay,
I gotta ask you though, what's your preference? I will still say 900D is pretty cool. I give props to Corsair for doing some interesting stuff there, and they've done an amazing job on their chassis line. But I like the 800D more than I like the 900D.
I personally, because I like to go with large radiators, didn't like the 800D because modification was required.
Yeah.
And it didn't natively support 480, which is why I keep telling Rajiv, like, I'm not putting that stacker on my desk unless I mod it for a 480 radiators in the bottom, because I'm, like we talked about earlier, I'm about silent PC, so I go with overkill on the surface area and 600 RPMs on my fans. That's how
all I'm saying is $800 for the case or go home. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, my microphone is sitting less than 2 feet.
And the case comes to you. It's awesome.
My microphone is sitting less than 2 feet from the four on the bottom of the four fans on the bottom of my 900D, and when I'm editing and I'm doing my thing, I cannot hear this computer, and noise bothers me. I'm a noise Nazi. I hate noise.
I'm with you, man.
You would hate my room. I got an AC going on behind me. I've got 24 Ultra Kazi fans. It sounds like a Hoover vacuum running next to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear people talking in the other part of the house that are just talking in a normal voice with my door shut over my computer. And people who've come in and seen this computer for the first time always go, "It's so quiet." And I have my fan profile set very aggressive to where the ramp on it's got to be hot before it even really kicks up.
Right.
But okay, so we got about 20 minutes left here, and I know people wanted to talk about this because I was at the press conference in Vegas. I got to see the Johnny do the debut of the 4K, not the 4K. I'm sorry, but the ROG monitor with the built-in VSync, and not VSync, sorry, G-Sync. God, I'm brain farting here. But we talked a little bit last week, and I told my viewers I wanted to save the discussion for this week because you would be the man to talk to about it. The realistic requirements to have playable FPS at 4K resolution, because a lot of people I don't think truly realize that 4K resolution is 1080p, the same amount of pixels as 4 1080p monitors. That's a huge strain on a single card, and we've seen some benchmarks start leaking from different people that are benchmarking it and seeing that it really can squash your card.
Yeah, I mean, it is, definitely, I mean, in the true enthusiast category, but it's not really anything new. I mean, if you think about the fact that you've already had
1600p.
You've already had multi-monitor gaming, right? I mean, 3-panel surround, whether it's at 1080p or whether it's at WQHD 2560 by 1440, that's actually even a higher resolution than 3K. And
but I think
people that are playing at that. So,
but I think, JJ, people know at that point that they have to go with an SLI or Crossfire setup at the very minimum. Yeah. So I think people are buying. The reason why I'm bringing this up is people are messaging me every day. Hey,
I know exactly where you're coming from.
Is a 760 capable of gaming at 4K? No. Well, I tell them no, it's not. That's my opinion, though, as an enthusiast.
And I put the caveat on this that I think that a lot of the reviewers actually, they have it, I don't want to say wrong, but they have the scope of gaming too limited. And what I mean by that is that if you go look at all the quintessential benchmarks that people that are evaluating 4K look at, they're definitely relevant. You're going to get people that ask, hey, what does it take to play Battlefield 4 at max settings on 4K, right? But I go, is Battlefield 4 the only game you're going to play? I go, for me it's not, because I'm going to play everything from Grid 2 to sometimes I want to throw Awesome Knots, and then I'm going to be able to want to jump into Planetary Annihilation, and then I want to jump into Shank, and then I want to jump into BF4. And the thing is that the game engine is going to be such a big factor at being able to drive the gameplay experience. Right. Even between similar games. So, BF3 take, for instance, you can actually play BF3 on 4K with 2 GTX 670s, which actually would be pretty equivalent if you consider the minimum frame rate performance of probably jumping over to probably a 780 single card.
Right.
So it's possible. Now, if you talk about wanting to say, hey, I want to consistently know that whatever game that I jump into, I can have an assured level of performance where I can keep, the image quality presets, at least at 80% of what the maximum would be, then in that situation, I'm definitely telling people you've got to be targeting at least dual GPU configurations,
Right.
starting off at like a 760 class GPU and going above. Now,
Right.
if you go below 760, then you're going to have more variability. But it really, once again, just depends on the overall game engine. Because I'll tell you, you can do like Grid 2 4K with pretty much every single setting maxed out on 4K on a single GPU, right? But you try to do that same thing jumping into, like I said, BF4, and that's not going to be the case.
Right.
So it really does depend on the game that you're going to be playing. But I think that's really cool. I mean, as a PC gamer, if you open up my Steam library, I've got games from every single genre, and they're all mixed all over the place.
Yeah.
And so that's what it really comes down to, is what type of games are you playing, and what's your expectation for the image quality.
And a step farther, I take that, which is kind of a canned response, because some of these responses are somewhat canned because they're so repetitive on these questions. You guys also have to ask yourself, how long is it going to be before you upgrade again? Because 4K gaming is going to start becoming more mainstream, but at the same time, too, as it gets cheaper, it's going to become more mainstream. I mean, since the first 4K monitors came out last CES compared to now, the prices have dropped substantially. But at the same time, too, I tell people, if you're looking at a $700 monitor and you're asking me about a $200 graphics card, you need to really look at your priorities.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes I don't know exactly sometimes how those questions work, because I get the same questions, and from my YouTube community or from the forums that I'm in, or at the PC DIY site, where it's in kind of lockstep, right? If you've got somebody that's looking to invest in an $800 monitor, they're generally somebody that is also in that same bracket of looking at a performance-oriented GPU, right?
Exactly.
So they're willing to spend that class, and that's a fundamental difference. You got a lot of the people that will comment saying, hey, that's not realistic, but that's just because that's maybe not necessarily in your price band for performance. And there's other configuration considerations, like Jerry, you actually have a great example of this kind of setup where, you have a non-traditional, non-realistic kind of environment at the amount of screen desktop space that you have.
Right.
And even though we've seen huge price drops in like WQHD monitors, there's some people that might never jump really past maybe 1080p, because they can really only comfortably fit a 24-inch monitor, right? They can't fit 27 or maybe even 28 inches in terms of the actual screen space that they're working in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you've got to take into consideration. You have to take into consideration how much space you have to work with, how much, what's, your upgrade time frame, and a lot of little variables that come into play like that. So you just, like you said, you have to start with the end in mind as far as what you're looking at, and that'll help to kind of break down a lot of that information. But definitely, like you said, as things become more mainstream, and especially as you start seeing these panels coming up, like our upcoming, $799 4K monitor, you're going to see a lot more content coming out, so that the community is going to have that information to help them know, is that a direction that they want to go? Is G-Sync a direction that they want to go? Is just doubling it up and getting two cheap 1080p monitors the way that they want to go? It's a great time to be a PC gamer, because all those choices will be out there.
I'll tell my viewers a couple of things. One right now, I've never owned a top tier or top shelf panel. I've never had a really nice panel, because to me, it's, I can deal with some edge bleeding or maybe some flash lighting or something, because I don't fixate on that sort of stuff. So I've never spent more than, like, this 27-inch I have right here was $299 for a 27-inch dimension. That's pretty cheap. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of, it's not an IPS. The panel quality is decent, but the color rendering on it is not the greatest. The contrast on it's okay, but it gets me by. So when people ask me, well, Jay, because it's amazing how many people are interested in what I would buy, and that's a lot of pressure, guys. Because if I tell you what I would buy, and you go down that path and you don't like it, that's a lot of pressure on us, especially as reviewers. But personally, I got to see both the panels at CES. I got to see the 4K panel and the new G-Sync ROG panel. I'm the kind of guy that would go straight to the 1440p G-Sync panel and not even look at 4K, because I'm not that ultra sharp resolution. I'm still perfectly fine with 1080p. I built a system for a guy that was specifically designed for a Dell Ultra Sharp 30-inch 1600p, and the resolutions, my eyes don't perceive any difference between 1440 and 1600.
And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem.
We're reaching resolutions at these smaller panel sizes that the eyes aren't perceiving.
You're right.
So that's the way I look at something when I go to buy a panel, and I think the general audience should do that too. Is, you know, I mean, like we talked about it last week.
4K was never designed to be on the desktop. It wasn't.
It was designed for cinema. In my opinion, it was designed for cinema.
Screen. It's designed for large format screens, 60-inch plus. Right now, I'm sitting 2.5 feet away from a 46-inch monitor, and if I try and strain as hard as I can, I have 20/15. I have very good vision. I can make out pixels very, very slightly, but from 10 feet away, I can't. On 4K, sitting at this distance, I should not be able to even remotely make out a pixel, which means going any smaller than 46-inch would benefit me in no way, and would just down.
I get where you're going, but it's not just pixel size; it's also screen space, right? Because
in the
same way that somebody might not be able to fit two large 27 inches side by side, right? When I go to a 28-inch 4K monitor, I have a huge amount of desktop space in terms of what's usable, right? So it's not just a question of PPI, right? There's multiple elements to that entire kind of chain, right? Because personally, if I don't have to have a bezel between two monitors and I can have almost the same screen real estate, then I'll take that, all day long. But it's in the same way that you get it's not to cut you off. It's just it's the same way that you get kind of coders and programmers, right, that love by 16 aspect ratios because they want that increase in that vertical height, right?
No, but hold on. I'm a software developer, and I have a 1600p. I bought my own Samsung 305T that I have on my desk with two 24s next to it. But
so you can appreciate the increased desktop space.
I can appreciate the desktop space, but again, on the same note, playing flip side to that is a software limitation. And what I mean by a software limitation is you're buying that bigger screen because now you get that double pixel density. So now your start bar is half the size, your windows are half the size. But you can achieve that same result by changing the PPI that the desktop's rendered at. You can go in and say, I want to render everything at 50% of your resolution, and you're still going to be able to have everything be small and have that text be a lot smaller globally throughout the system. People just don't do it because the text isn't crisp. But if you go up to 1080...
Why would you want to look at fuzzy text, right?
No, but that's my point, is once you surpass the PPI of the eye, it's not going to be fuzzy text anymore. It comes down to software algorithms to process that text so that it doesn't look blurry. Because we're
getting into very subjective topic, though, because it's just like the ongoing debate. Well, how many FPS can the eye truly perceive? Well, scientists would like to say it's XYZ, but everybody's eyes are different, right?
No, fair enough. But Jay, let me ask you this. So let's just go for the big scale. Let's say 8K. Okay. If you go to 8K and you put an 8K screen on something that's got a 6-inch, let's just go ridiculous here, 6-inch screen. If I gave you one that was 1080p, one that was 4K, and one that was 8K, I honestly don't believe you could find anybody that could perceive the difference without getting like a microscope.
Let me say this:
CES,
the Sharp booth and the Sony booth are within 50 paces of each other.
Sure.
And last year, everyone was talking about 4K, and Sony had an 8K display, an 84-inch 8K display. Yes. And this year they brought the exact same display out, and Miss J and I went back and forth because they both had 84-inch panels out, 4K and 8K.
Yeah.
We went back and
84 is like gigantic, right? I mean, that's like borderline projector. Yeah.
Back and forth, and I literally, with the exception of getting so close that I put a smudge on the screen, stuck my face against the 8K. Yeah. Then I stuck my face against the 4K, and it's funny too how many people were watching me. I literally was like this close to the panel.
Yeah.
And we looked. My wife and I looked at each other and we went, "We can't see a difference between 4 and 8K."
But now, the thing though to keep in mind with this, and both of you guys actually make really valid points, but you have to remember there's always multiple layers to what you get as things improve. So an example is that when you get to maybe a 4K panel, it might not just be the sheer resolution, right? You might have a 10-bit color lookup versus an 8-bit color lookup, and that also
might be also. That would be.
I do want to put out JJ. I do want to put out a caveat that when I was at Newegg last week, they had a couple of 4K panels on display. I won't say the names or anything. Yeah, they had a couple of panels on display, and Jennifer, Miss J, was looking at one of the panels, and she's like, "What is this?" And it was kind of still in the box, like half out. I mean, it was a TV. And Paul says, "Oh yeah, that's the 4K." And she goes, "Nice." And he goes, "No, it sucks." And he went into the reasons why it sucks because, resolution like we talked about
It's
earlier,
only
JJ,
part, it's only
it's
part
a
of the
spec.
experience.
It's
Yeah.
a spec. It's not an experience. And
Yep.
so there's a lot of things people have to look at when it comes to the way panels are designed. There's also pixel gate. What's the space between the pixel? You know, there's
Yeah, the
a
screen
lot of,
door is what I was talking about
and
there.
and
Yeah,
that's
it's-
why.
And that's what I'm saying. So I think that as things evolve, at the end of the day, regardless of whatever it is you're looking for, like I said, start with the end in mind, right?
Yeah.
If you're a content creation professional and you care most about color fidelity and accuracy, regardless of whatever technologies are out there, what's going to get you closest to that, right? If
Right. I
you're a
absolutely
gamer
agree.
and what you care first and foremost about is input lag and response, what technologies exist to get you there, right?
Right.
And because everybody's going to have their own perception, everybody's going to have their own perspective at ultimately where their stopgap is at good enough, as opposed to a point of indifference, right? But as long as you kind of keep that framework in mind, then regardless that for somebody that technology might not be the fit for them, that doesn't mean that there's not somebody else that can appreciate or use that technology.
No,
Yeah,
I agree with you. I was speaking more from the perspective of like me personally, my own personal views. I know it. I'm 100% with you that everybody has different feelings about things. I know, like my boss, he's a photographer. He went and spent, I think, $4,000 on an NEC 1600p display, and it's like this thick, and it's because the color accuracy on it's flawless. Like it's even got its own internal calibration thing. You like plug into it and put a calibrator on it and adjust all the color depth. But that was important to him. Otherwise, I look at the monitor, I'm like, doesn't look any different than my 305T that was a fourth of the cost.
That's why I tell people when they ask me, what is it you're planning on doing? How long are you going to use it? And what's important to you? Because, I mean, Jerry, we've talked about it. I've got the cheapest floor model from Best Buy TV back here behind me in my home studio because I never watched the thing. So I don't need it to be super nice. It's my daughter's cartoon TV. However, in my living room, when I bought that panel, I bought Panasonic's top tier best of CES panel that year.
You know what scares me about the 4K initiative the most, though, is that people always want the best. If you're an uninformed viewer, you go in and you say, okay, I'm going to go buy a screen. Wow, this one's got 4 times the resolution of this one. You should get it. But that means you need a computer now that has 4 times the processing power, well, even in some cases more, to drive it. So now you go play a game at full native resolution on an LCD panel because everybody knows scaling sucks. Because scaling is expensive and it rarely produces a flawless result because you end up getting overly square pixels and if the resolutions aren't perfectly symmetrical.
I've told people
well,
honestly,
it's the nature of the beast, though. It's the same exact thing that we ran into when we shifted to WQHD, right? When WQHD hit the market, it was really hard to run anything at 2560 resolutions.
Yeah.
Oh God, I remember 16. I remember was it 1600 by 1200? Remember when that was the standard 4x3 res of the you'd go get your Sony Sony Trinitron monitor, it cost like $5,000 at the time, and you're like, wow, that resolution. I remember computers didn't catch up and they weren't capable of running anything at that resolution for a good probably 5 years.
If you look at the rate of where we're at now, at least with the way the technology is pacing, the great thing is that there's shorter gaps as these technologies come out, right? Even though you're talking about 4K, the legitimate thing is when 2560 came out, there wasn't really usable a GPU performance that could do 2560, right? It might cost you money right now, but you know what? You can game legitimately at 4K if you want to do it right now.
I typically tell people, if you're going to buy 4K today, be prepared to spend equally as much, if not maybe more, on GPU performance because
I would say, it's at least a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, despite my argument, I will have 4 42-inch 4K panels as soon as they can achieve 60 hertz. I don't want this 30 hertz Senki shit. I want 60 hertz or even 120 when that technology comes along. Yeah, this is all getting upgraded, guys. Because it makes sense.
That was one of the limitations of the panel that Paul said sucked, by the way, was it was a 30 hertz panel.
Yeah, but ours is native 60.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? How big is it, though?
60. 28.
No, I laugh because there's no way Jerry will ever go away from the 46 inches.
No, the smallest screen I have that I ever use anymore is 24 inches, and when I have to use it, I seriously just get mad.
But you got all that extra resolution. You don't need the bigger space.
Jerry.
It's a 1440p 27-inch, and you know what I use it for?
Yeah, gauges on your sim.
That's widget.
Oh, okay. All right. You're special, Jerry. You're special.
Jerry, all you have to do is sit really close to it, and you have a big panel. Okay?
No, I agree with Hitman. Hitman, you're the right. D-Sync is a game changer.
What's that?
Oh no, Hitman. He's like,
Oh.
G-Sync is a game changer. It is.
Yeah.
It is a game changer. It rocks.
No, I was gonna say I'm all for more resolution. My point being is I just don't want that to come at a huge cost right now. I know that technology is gonna catch up and everything, but I have my Visual Studio up. I've got my 10,000 windows. I'm running my compiler at work. I'm going through. I love tiny text. I can handle tiny on my 30-inch screen. I'm running like an 8-point font on that 1600p panel. And I do love that. But my point is if the pixel density is higher than the human can perceive, running the graphics processing power to service that on a small panel where you're not getting a benefit from it, you're just wasting graphics power at that point.
Well, it depends on. It depends, right? There's a difference between being able to see it, but then still being able to experience it, because you might not be able to see "quote unquote" the pixels when you're gaming Battlefield in 4K, but the native resolution increase and the improvement in overall fidelity of the pixel and the overall imagery that you have, as well as the improved expansiveness of the image and the field of view, you can definitely tell it. There's no way that you don't put 1080p, 2560, and 4K side by side, and you can't tell the differential in terms of not only the spatial view, but also the actual sharpness of the image.
How would the spatial view change though? Because it's the same exact aspect ratio.
No, it depends on the game engine. But the game engine, some of the actual game engines, as you scale up the resolution, you actually have a wider field of view. It's available. It's just like if you go into multi-monitor gaming, because
Right.
you've increased the resolution space vertically and horizontally.
That's true, Jerry. It's not just saying, okay, we're going to take everything on the screen, make it bigger and sharper. They're actually saying we can leave things relatively the same type of aspect ratio, but we're just going to start to show more of what's on the screen.
That goes back to my point of scaling, though. You could just as easily scale that same field of view down to less pixels, and perceivably
I'm really curious as
to
what, because I have not gotten an opportunity to really play with any 4K monitors.
We need 4K monitors, man. Can you hook us up, JJ? Come on, buddy.
I'm curious. I'm curious as to what 1080p gaming would look like on a 4K monitor, since you have basically 4 pixels creating that one.
I think it'd look like shit, actually.
I'm worried. Not worried. I'm wondering what that would look like.
I guess it would depend on the screen door, though. If there wasn't a lot of space between the pixels and they were very, very densely packed, then you'd probably still perceive it as a single pixel, and it would still be the same size as a single pixel on a 1080p display.
It all just depends on the quality of the scaler, man. Quality of the scaler is what's going to define that. When I've seen it that it's pretty good, and I've seen it where it's not so great, but that's all just dependent. All just dependent.
Well, guys, it's getting to be about that wrap-up time. One last thing we want to ask JJ here is your personal gaming setup. What are you running over there?
Oh, well, man, I've got 6 boxes, man. That's a lot of boxes.
Your favorite box. Your favorite box. It's the one you use the most.
Oh, but that's like asking me to pick, which child do I love more, right?
Yeah, but deep down inside, we all have our favorite.
The one you're sending to college. That's what I want to hear about.
I don't know, man. Each one, for me, it's a really hard proposition, because you have to remember, because since I worked in the design and development of so many of these products, each one holds really when I got the Impact developed, that was really special to me, because we did a lot of stuff on that card that we'd been working literally for years to get in, right? Or like when we did the Formula board and we revamped even the Supreme Effects even further. Once again, really personal to me in a lot of different ways. So I can't necessarily pick that out, but if we just pick like one of my default kind of go to gaming system. That one right now, I actually just switched it over. It was running a Rampage 4 Extreme, but I just switched it over to actually a Rampage 4 Black Edition, and then from there on the GPU side, I am running a GTX 780. I'm actually running this guy right here, the 780 Ti DirectCU 2 card. So I've got 2 of those, and I got that in SLI, and that's pretty much the box. It's a 49 it's Ivy Bridge E. I've got it overclocked, pretty straightforward. I've got 2 1 terabyte SSDs, then 2 4 terabyte mechanical hard drives in there. I've got a Zonar STX Essence for my sound card, the STU. So actually I switched over from a Zonar Essence STX PCIe to the actual USB version, because that way I can switch it over between my notebook and my desktop from when I'm working, because I'll bring my notebook from home and I can just switch over to the better quality sound.
I have an STX Fist Bump. That's a fantastic card. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. So that's my box.
You left one thing out. What does one of the designers at ASUS use for RAM?
I'm sorry?
You left out the RAM. I want to know what the ASUS guy uses for RAM.
Oh, so as far as for that box, I've actually got different kits for almost every box. I've got Mushkin, I've got Corsair, I've got Crucial, I've got G-Skill. And that box, that one is using that one's Corsair.
So have you pretty much kind of put together a box of basically different projects you've worked on?
I would say, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I have dedicated systems for kind of each purpose. So I've got a system that I literally just use for predominantly my email, my web browsing, just kind of maybe some light editing purposes. Then I have a system that specifically all it's there for is just for gaming. I then have a dedicated HTPC system that does, I have a CTIN. So 6-channel TV tuner, right? So that records everything to that, and then I have a NAS box that distributes all that information out. So each one is kind of a dedicated box. I don't use really any one for like crossover purposes. So
We have
that's
a lot of
bit
similar
different.
setups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Mostly-
Jerry. Hey, Jerry. I heard he said something in there, and I think it gave me an idea. I think you and I need to do email machines.
Email. I already have several email machines.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like one machine that does absolutely nothing but email. I have enough parts. I could put something together.
Does it count if it's at work? Is this
I'm
your
a-
work machine or at home?
At home, and I'm gonna water cool it.
Oh, because I actually I have an email box at home. It's literally a God, what is it? It's an IBM Lenovo T61P laptop that literally just sits there with Outlook on the screen 24/7. That's all it just sits there.
Okay, obviously I can't hang with your guys' setups because I'm a very humble builder, and I've just barely, for the first time ever, had a second working PC that actually has, like, I won't even say it has high-end parts. It's just a second PC that works. It's the first time for me. So, 6 systems. Well, I can aspire. I will aspire to follow in JJ's footsteps. I mean, shoot, you guys thought that I had Tech Edition. Holy crap.
Yeah, but I want to caveat that to have a great system, it doesn't cost you a lot of money. Like
True.
I just did a great $750 AMD build that we did over at the PC DIY content. So I definitely do want to express that fact that I try to keep things realistic and realize that everybody's got different price points that they're looking at to be able to get into PC DIY. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is be able to represent the entire space of not only what you can build, but how much you can build for, to be able to keep this community diverse and interesting. I don't want it to be in an elitist community, but I also am really happy about the fact that even as the convergence of technology is shifting and adjusting to where 5-6 years ago, when somebody wanted to get on the internet, the only option was to build a computer to get online. Now
Right.
You can get online with a tablet, you can get online with a notebook, you can get online with a smartphone, right? But the cool thing is that if you're building a system, you want to build. Whether it's because you have that personal interest to want to build, whether it's because you want that customization and want to be able to put your own hardware there and there, whether it's because you're interested in having the cutting edge of what technology has to offer, that I think is really cool to now be in a community where it's not just having people in there that are literally there because it's the only option, but it's because you're choosing to be there.
Right.
And that for me is personally really exciting and really interesting to now be able to spend time with, guys that, are 14, 15 and building for the first time, to guys that, they're 65 and the last time they built was 6 years ago, but they're interested in building their brand new box to take them for that next 5 years. And so, it's a great time, to be in this community. Ton of hardware and a lot of really interesting stuff to work with, and we're definitely looking for all the feedback that we can to make sure that the information that we're putting out there keeps things interesting and relevant. And I definitely, like I said, I know that I got a pretty beefy and pretty expensive system, but at the same time, I do want to help to reinforce the fact that you don't need that to have a great experience and a great quality system.
Yeah. Well, JJ, I want to thank you deeply for coming on tonight. I appreciate all the insight and knowledge that you brought here. If you guys have any questions for JJ, this video is going to archive. It will automatically save to the channel. Put your comments down below. Maybe he could stop by every now and then and kind of see if there's something new on there. But yeah, I like to kind of point out the analytics from what we had on the live show. We had about 1,000 viewers tonight.
Awesome.
Yeah, our average concurrent was about 273, so it's up from last week. I mean, last week we were sitting at about 180. So, JJ, they came for you, buddy. I appreciate it. As always, guys, you will see this on the archive. You'll see us in our next video, and I'm pretty sure that at some point we'll have JJ back, especially when there's some new, maybe the new product refreshes. We'll get in here. We'll talk a little bit more about what's new from ASUS. But I certainly appreciate you coming by.
No, and it's been great talking to you guys, and thank you guys for just tuning in and drop in your guys' questions. I know that we didn't necessarily get to answer as much of the comments there that were flowing through. So, like Jay was saying, feel free to go ahead and drop them in there. I'll do my best to go ahead and respond to items that I can there. Or you can also feel free to go ahead and visit us at PC DIY, whether it's the YouTube site or the website, where I do. One of the big things that I think I work on very closely is a lot of community engagement, answering people's feedback.
Yeah, and I will put the links to both the pcdiy.asus.com down there, as well as the YouTube channel. So if you guys have rewatched this and made it that far, you can find the information down there. So I'm going to go ahead and play the outro, and then, guys, we'll see you in my next video or next week's live stream. And don't forget, Rajiv from Cooler Master is going to be our guest next week, so you guys will get to talk to him about chassis and cooling and keyboards and all that stuff. So, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks for coming by.